All right, so in the second part here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about the modulation, okay? And this is where stuff starts to actually get a bit different with synthesizers, is in the modulation section of things. And remember, all the stuff is in your notes, so make sure you've got the notes open, you're following along with the notes and all that. But basically, there's two types of modulation for synthesizers. There's envelope modulation, it's LFO modulation. And these are what we would call modulators. And this has nothing to do with the sound. It doesn't, like, what I mean by that is it doesn't touch the sound. So remember over here, when we talk about this one, the original building blocks, these all have to do with the sound. They all touch the sound. You've got the oscillator goes into the filter, goes into the amplifier. But this part here, if you can see, the oscillator goes in, the filter goes in the amplifier. The modulators are down here beneath everything, and you've got the LFO and the envelope. And so these here are, they're affecting the sound. What they're doing is they're changing parameters that affect the sound. And the parameters are inside of the oscillator, the filter, and the amplifier. So the envelope and the LFO do not touch the sound directly. What they do is they modulate parameters associated with the oscillator, amp, or filter to change the sound. So an envelope, let's start with the envelope here. An envelope changes the sound over time. It changes over time. So you have 4 different parts. Most envelopes have 4 different parts, not all of them. You have the A, D, S, and R. Attack, decay, sustain, and release. That's here. Attack, decay, sustain, release. So essentially it's like this. When you press a key on the keyboard, you press the key down, and the note on message is sent. So the note on message goes, and remember this from our MIDI days, note on, and it makes the sound play over time. So let me just go ahead and get a sound up here. Let's use the reactor here. We're going to use reactor to show this. So here, wait, let's make sure we're playing the right one. Actually, no, let's not use reactor. Let's use the analog. Here's my analog. Just have to go down here because this is already set up so we can see it really easily. So here we are. So I'm going to go ahead and change this one here. There's this, go on my filter. That's a really ugly square wave though. I don't know why it's so ugly. Alright, so we'll use that, but I'll use a filter. Filter on a little bit. Cool. Okay, so we have this sound here. And if I want to make the sound kind of change how it sounds, like the like envelope of the sound. Let's start with the kind of attack and release and all that stuff. So this is the overall waveform shape. So you hear how I press it and it plays and it stops. Oh, that's why. Hold on. There we go. There, much better. That's the sound I wanted. Sorry, I didn't realize that oscillator 2 was on. Okay, so go over here to my amplifier, and we can see I've got an attack, a decay, a sustain, and a release. And so what happens is, if I have my attack and my release set really short, the sound, when I play it, when I hit the key, it's going to play immediately, and when I let go, it's going to release immediately. Let me go ahead and get the keyboard up here. There we go. There's my keyboard so you can see what I'm doing. So here we go. Here's this. It just plays and stops. Now the reason why it's doing that is because my sustain here, actually you probably can't see it because of the keyboard. Let me move that keyboard off actually. So my sustain here is set all the way up. Now this one is a level. So if I push this down, Hear how it just clicks? Just a click. That's because my sustain is all the way down. If I turn this up, it gets louder. Right? So that's showing us the sustain level. Now, if I wanted it so I hit it and it holds, but when I let go, it takes a while to release and go back to nothing, I turn my release up like this. When I let go, and let me show you that with the camera here. You can see how it takes a second to get back to zero, to get back to nothing. All right. So there we go. There's that. Okay. All right. So that's that stuff there. All right. Sorry, I was just looking at the messages in here that I didn't see before. Okay, cool. So we can hear the sound is it takes a while for it to die off. And that comes from this part right here. So we have the attack, decay, sustain, and release on here, and the note on like this. So let's just take a look at this here. The attack and the decay, the sustain, and release. So basically every sound wants to go from 0 to 100%. And I like to talk about this stuff in terms of percentages because we have the loudest part of the sound and we have silence. So silence is 0% loudness. And then 100% loudness is whatever we have our main output set to. So the attack is the time it takes to go from 0, from silence, to 100% loudness. That's the attack, and that's a time. Then we have our sustain, which is our level of like how we're holding the key down. Like when we're holding it down, how long does it take? How long does the sound go for? That's the sustain level. So from 100% to the sustain level, that's our decay time. Now in this case, with this synth right now, we've got everything set to, everything set up in such a way that it's all the same. But if I turn my sustain down a little bit, like right here, I take it and I grab it and I turn it down to 50%. And I turn my decay time up. Notice, hear how it gets quieter over time? Let me turn my sustain down a little bit more. Hear how it gets loud, it starts loud and gets softer. All right, so that's that. And that is the decay time. That's showing us the decay time right here, our decay time here. So the time it takes to go from our sustain, our 100% to the sustain level, whatever that is, that's our decay time. So the first time the A is from 0, from silence, up to 100%. And then from 100% to the sustain level, whatever that is, that's decay. And then once I let go of the note, I let go, then our release starts. The release doesn't happen until we let go of the note. So the release takes us back to 0% again. So I play the note, play the note. If I hold it down, it's going to stay at that level forever. It's never going to change. And then when I let go, it's going to go back to 0. You hear how that works? So if I go back in here and I change my attack to like a bigger number, it's going to take more time to get to that top part. So now, let's hear. I'm going to put this on like this, and let's listen. 100%. Sustain level, release. And that's the kind of playthrough of a note. So attack, 100%, comes back down. Our sustain level is happening right now. If I hold this note, it's just going to keep that sustain level. It's just going to keep that level going forever and ever. I let go, that's the release back to 0. So that's how that all divides up. That's how it all works there. You can see that right there. Let's go back to this here. So when you press a key, a note on message is sent. When you release it, a note off message is sent. The envelope is what happens from the time you press the key to the time you release it, and a little after. And that's how that all works out right there. That, what I just explained to you, took me forever to wrap my head around, because it really helps to have somebody kind of showing it to you like this. And I hope y'all can understand it, but if you didn't understand it from today, let's talk about it in Zoom. Let's keep talking about it. You need to kind of get a synth and play with it and mess around with it. And we're going to show you how to do that in using Reactor and Reactor blocks, because anybody who has a computer can download Reactor and Reactor blocks. And if you don't have a computer, you just have your iPad. We're also going to talk about this in the iPad. There's some stuff in the iPad that's free that we can mess around with. So that's the envelope. The next one we want to talk about is our LFO. And the LFO is a low frequency oscillator. It's really just a very slow oscillator. The oscillator plays the waveform over and over and over again, and the LFO does the same thing. It just plays it really slow. Now, one thing we didn't really talk about today that you talked about definitely in Mod 1 is that every waveform has what we call a cycle or a period. And that goes from, here, let me just get my camera up. Okay, here, so from here to here, if that's the waveform starts and it goes, ooh, like this. And let me just show you in my desktop here. Our waveforms are like this. This is one cycle of the wave. It goes from here to here. See that? It goes from one point to the next. Okay, that's one cycle of the wave. What that happens is, the faster that cycle happens, that's the higher pitch, or the slower it happens is a lower pitch. Okay? And when we talk about human hearing, we talk about it in terms of when we talk about these, like how fast or slow it is, we talk about it in frequency and hertz. And a hertz, 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. That's what a hertz is. A hertz is a cycle per second. So 1 time through this loop is per 1 second. The human hearing can go down, realistically, we can go down to about, I don't know, 30 or 40, but speakers are set to recreate down to 20. They say that's the lowest limit of our human hearing. That's not, most people don't hear down to 20 hertz, but you can certainly feel it. And if you have a big enough speaker, you can make it so you can feel these really low frequencies, even below 20 hertz. And those are what we call subharmonic. It's like below our hearing. Sub means below. So below our hearing, but we can still feel it. And if you have a big enough speaker, you can recreate that. You can actually create those low frequencies. Well, what they realized was that we can't hear below a certain frequency, but we can use these to control things. And that's what an LFO is. An LFO is just an oscillator that's made to go very, very slow. And it goes so slow that now we can start to use it to control stuff. And it's usually just the same waveforms as a normal oscillator. It's a sine, a triangle, square, and sawtooth. The difference between an LFO and an envelope is that an envelope usually plays once. You trigger the key, you hit the key on, and it starts that envelope playing. And then when you let go, it stops it going through its motions. It goes through one time. Note on, goes through, stops at the sustain part, and releases. And then you release it and it goes to the end. An LFO, however, when I press my key or whatever I'm using to trigger the LFO, it just loops. It loops that waveform. Whatever, wait, do I have it over here? No. Whatever that waveform is, right here, whichever waveform is, it's going to play this through over and over and over again. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what we can do with this. And we can use this for different stuff. LFOs have three controls: frequency and sync and retrigger. The frequency is the main one. That's where you find on every single LFO, and that is the rate, how fast the LFO moves. So let's go over here, and we're going to go back to Ableton Live. And I don't really need to show my keyboard with this one now, because that's not as important. So what we're going to do is we're going to use an LFO. Here's our LFO. We have 2 LFOs in here, and we're going to use this to control the pitch of the oscillator. So Wait, let me make the, I'm gonna make my amplifier envelope so it just plays and makes it loud. There we go. It's just on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the LFO control the pitch of my oscillator, and down here is where we can make this happen. So here where it says pitch mod. Pitch mod stands for modulation. Pitch modulation, and we can have the LFO, how much the LFO affects our modulation. So I'm going to set this to like 12. Oops, what can I set it to? 1? Okay, so 0 to 1. So I have that for 1, and now let's just listen to what it's doing. Set that to 0.50. There we go. The higher the number, the more it modulates it. So this is what my LFO currently looks like. It's the sine wave. Let's listen to what a triangle wave sounds like. Almost the same. Let's hear a rectangle. Right? And then, oh, they don't have the, interesting. Wait, let's see if this can do anything with it. No, that doesn't do it. Attack? No, that's a different thing. Interesting. They don't have a, they don't have the sawtooth in here. Huh. Okay, so let's just use the rectangle then. So this rectangle here, now we can take this and we can make it faster or slower using our rate. And you hear how that sounds like an old video game. It sounds like what you might assume like an Atari video game or something like that. Sounds like that's what this is. Let's see here. Damien asked a question a bit ago. So you can manipulate it all with it. And you were talking, that was a long time ago you asked that question. Sorry, I was in the middle of something. So what you're talking about is you can manipulate everything with an envelope. You're talking about these modulators in general, I think. And the answer is yes. You can manipulate anything, almost anything, with these modulation sources. So the modulators, the modulation sources, envelopes and LFOs. And this is what really changes different synthesizers, is that different synthesizers have different parameters you can control, and some of them you can control everything, and some of them you can only control a few things or whatever. And the way they work is very different as well. So this analog synthesizer is a very basic synthesizer. It has 2 oscillators, and it's got a noise oscillator, and it's got 2 filters, and it's got 2 amplifiers, and then you've got your LFO and your main output and all that stuff, and it's got 2 LFOs. There's not a whole lot you can do with this one. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit retrigger. What this is going to do is it means that every time I hit a key on my keyboard, it's going to play it from the beginning again. It always sounds the same. If I hit retrigger though, and I play it, hear how it sounds like it's starting differently every time? Right? But if you hit retrigger, it's going to be exactly the same every time. So if I wanted this to sound like a French ambulance, I can do this, slow it down. Change this. Let's mess with this. That's probably a little bit too... There we go. And now that sounds like a French ambulance, if you've watched any movies with French ambulances in them. And it's really just a super, super quick thing that's just like it's just an oscillator, and it just has an envelope on it, and they just turn it on and off. And that's literally it. The amplifier is just literally just making it play and making it stop. Right, there's your ambulance in France, or maybe it's a police siren. Now, in America, it's different. It's not that shape at all. It's actually a sine wave in America. So, and it's a different pitch. It's a different level. And it's a different, like, it's more of like a type of thing. I'd have to mess with it for a while. I'm not going to bother with it right now. But I don't know if you've noticed, but actually police cars in New York now have, it started maybe 10 years ago or so, they added a different oscillator frequency into them. So they have that woo sound that's on top, the whoop, 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 whoop type of thing they can do on top, right? But it has a lower pitch in it as well. Woo, 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 if you've noticed. The reason why they have that lower pitch in there is because low frequencies travel further than high frequencies. And so they put those low frequencies in so you can hear the police coming from further away. And it's an interesting little thing that they added in. And when we noticed that, if I remember the first time noticing that, I was talking with my friend Sam, who's like a like sound nerd like I am, and we were both like, wow, that's so, like, they're using audio, you know, physics smartly, which you never really, I don't know, technology. And it's not even much of like real, you know, hard technology. They just had to put a lower speaker in. So that's the LFO. Now the LFO, we can have it be connected to all sorts of stuff. So routing, and this is where routing comes in. How do you connect these modulation sources with their destinations? Different synthesizers handle routing in different ways. Sometimes the source will have menus to select the destination. Sometimes the destination will have a modulation amount knob in it. So different ways that we can do this. So let me just show you a couple of ways that this is done. Some things we have to talk about. This sometimes they have a modulation matrix. But a couple things you have to know about is the source and the destination and the amount. And this is oftentimes the trickiest part of understanding a synthesizer is learning how it does modulation. So let's just take a look at a couple of different ways that synthesizers do modulation. So let's just look at the Mini V3 here as a starting point, because this is one of the earliest synthesizers. And this one here doesn't really have much modulation. You have a modulation mix over here, this thing here, and you can flip some buttons to control some stuff, but really this one's limited. It's just got 2 filters, and you can use oscillator number 3 as an LFO. So I would turn this off over here, and I'd bring the control down so it's not affected by my keyboard. And I've got over here, I've got 2 envelopes. And the envelopes, one is for my filter and one is for my amplifier. That's what's going on over here. And then with this one, let's see if we can get this to do it. I don't really program this one a whole lot, so it's just a little bit mysterious to me. But okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and bring up my sustain level. Let's go ahead and pull this up so you can see it. So this is my loudness, what they call the loudness contour, which is your amp envelope. So I'm going to go ahead here and turn the. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my keyboard up. Okay, so we got that there. Let me turn it down a little bit over here. So it's not too loud. So now let's see if we can adjust. What can we adjust with our oscillator over here? Let's see, I'm not even sure how this works. Oscillator modulation on. Let's see. How do I do this? I actually don't remember. Yeah, like I said, different ones have different ways to do this. Nick, I don't know if you've used this thing enough, or maybe Liv, maybe you know how to program the Mini in here. Oscillation, modulation. Well, this, okay, this one, because it's Arturia, it has a different modulation way to do this in here. So here, let's see here. VCO3. Okay, so this is how you do it in here. So what we do is we set up our VCO3 to control. So the source is this. Let's turn this one off. So the source is this, and our destination is this. So this is a modulation matrix. So you get here by clicking the little arrows over here on the side, and here we're going to have this set the source and destination here. So cool. So over here is our source, is our VCO3, which is this one down here. And then the destination, let's make it be our pitch. So our VCO frequency modulation. This. Did that do anything? It did not. Yeah, I can't. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I just had to turn this to low. That's why I wasn't hearing it. There you go, and I can change it to this one here. Right, so you can start getting really sci-fi sounds out of this thing. Put this over here like this. There we go. So it's my face is on top of it. And then we can also use this to control like our filter. So let's go over here to our cutoff frequency here. And now change this. Make it stop. Yeah, it's pretty annoying. But that's how you can do that. Also, you could turn your volume down. So this is how we can use modulation in here. Now this is actually different from how it works on the actual hardware, because the hardware doesn't have a modulation matrix like this. But now you're seeing the modulation matrix. And the modulation matrix, let's take a closer look at this. What we have is we have a source, which is our VCO3, and you click on this and you have different sources. There's not that many sources, but there's a few. And then you have the destination, and the destination is what you want it to change. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. We could have 1, 2, what is it, 8 of these. So you can do a lot of different stuff with this. And they also have actually in here the motion recorder, and you can have the motion recorder controlling different stuff, and you can actually put in here. It's like a envelope. It's like a LFO that you can program yourself, and it's a pretty cool thing. You can do some really neat stuff with it. Really cool rhythmic stuff with it. You can put some, in here like this, and you can have different ones, different lanes that are controlling different stuff. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you can have like a little line that goes up like that. You can control that like that. So you can have different like this. And this controls different things. So now when we hit go, let's see, how do we? So you can make different like make different like patterns and stuff with it, which is pretty cool. This kind of thing, like that, do that. Right, you could do that, and then in the middle of it, you can have like a mark that goes up like this. Whoops, that's not what I want to do, sorry. Let's do like this, up to here, right into the middle, and then we'll just put a straight line across the top. Right, and you can make it sync to stuff. You can do all sorts of cool stuff with this. So that's that. That's another way you can do modulation. That's a very modern way to do modulation. If we go over here to our Reactor 6, well, let's come back to that one here. We go into analog. Analog, the way this one does it is you have 2 LFOs, and you can control how much those LFOs are controlling each of the parameters in here. So we've got this one here, right? Like this. That's controlling the pitch, and how much it's controlling the pitch. How fast it's going. We can do that, right? Right. We can turn that off by hitting this and hitting 0 on our keyboard. So now it's not affecting it at all. If I want that to LFO1 to affect my filter, I go down here to my frequency modulation here, and I say, all right, let's make this that. I'm going to turn this down. There we go, like that. I can make it faster and slower. that. I can change on my LFO, I can change what kind of wave type I've got. I don't know why they have a sine and a triangle in here and not a sawtooth. There might be a way to change one of these. The way Ableton Live does some stuff sometimes is you can change a sine wave into a triangle, but it doesn't look like it here. Interesting. All right, so that's how this one works. So basically, if I want my modulation to control a parameter, I have to go to the parameter, and then I've got my choices here. So this one has LFO1, envelope, key, that stuff there. And the envelope can be found, where's the envelope? Oh, the envelope is actually up here across the top for my filter. And on my amp as well, and the amp can also do a panning thing. Here, let's go ahead and turn that off. Come over here to my amp, and I can make it pan. So you can make it slower or faster. I can make it a rectangle. And I can change the width. Oh wait, that would be the amount over here. Wait, right over here. Wait, where is it? No, I can't find it anymore. Oh, pan here. So I can change that to 0.5. So it's not as wide of a pan. And if you've got headphones on, you can hear that really clearly. So that's that one there. And then if I go into Massive, Massive does it in a completely different way. And this is one of the things that made Massive so cool, especially back in the day. Because Massive's been around for a long time. A very, very long time. Excuse me, that's a sneeze. So if I go in here and I want to use Massive to control like my filter, for example. Let's say I want to use my an LFO to control my filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play my note. Oh, wait, sorry. I just spent all that time getting. Okay, there's my Massive, and there's that. Hold on, let me just pull that up to the top. Okay, so we got this here. And here's my filter here. My amplifier, it's envelope number 4 if you were wondering. My decay level. So a couple things about Massive is that Massive has what they call a decay level, which is our sustain level. That's what that is. That's that. So I'm going to move my oscillator so it goes all the way over to filter number 1. And then I'm going to grab my filter number 1. I'm going to turn on a filter. So there's that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an LFO to control that filter. So I grab this one here, I click on this little arrows, and I move the number 5 up here to this place, and I click on this to show how much it's going to control it. And here's my rate over here. And if I wanted to take that, if I want to get rid of it, I just click on it and I hit off. I right click, sorry, not click, I right click and I hit off. And same thing over here. If I wanted to control my pitch, grab it, go over here to my pitch, which is over here. Click on this. Boop. And now this shows me how much I'm controlling it. I want to do it by a couple of, like an octave here. There it is. And again, my rate. Like that. So I can just click on this and right click and hit off, and it gets rid of it. And you'll notice that whenever I have it, it puts a little line around it so you can see how much it's affecting it. One of the things that Massive has that's super cool is that it has, each one can be an LFO. Each one of these LFOs can be an LFO or a performance or a stepper. And let's just look at the performer here. This has to be playing. I'm going to play my... So I can step through, and if I use this one here, I'm going to click it and drag it over to here. And now it's Let's go ahead and make this go faster. Make it affect it more. So what's cool about this is now I can put a rhythm. I can put like a rhythm into here, and I can load different curves in by clicking on this load curve button, and I click the curve I want. I put it where I want it to be. Right? I can do this. And I can play with my keyboard. So it's kind of like an arpeggiator type of thing. And that's a pretty cool way to mess with stuff in there. Johnny says, I like Massive. I didn't know you can load a curve. It's been a while since I messed with it. Yeah, you should definitely give it a revisit. You can do some really dope stuff with it. I'm nowhere near an expert at programming Massive, but I know you can do some really cool stuff like that with it. And there's a lot more, and there's more than 3 oscillators in Massive. Like, you really need to take a look at Massive. Actually, I've been kind of waiting to buy Massive X. They just came out with a newer version of Massive like a couple months ago. And it seems really cool. I haven't really, but I haven't jumped into it yet. I'm waiting for like a sale on it or something like that. So I mean, they were running a sale for a while, and I just didn't get it. But I bought Pigments not that long ago, which I think is really dope. And Pigments works kind of the same way. But before we talk about Pigments, actually, well, let's do Pigments right now because it does work very similarly. So here's my Pigments synth. I'm just going to drop that on another channel over here. Yeah, you can go crazy with Massive, but here's Pigments. Pigments is kind of like the modern version of Massive, I would say. It's like the newer version. It's a wavetable, and you can do all sorts of stuff with it. It's mostly wavetable synthesis, but you have your modulation sources down here across the bottom. You have all these modulation sources. And with this one here, you can modulate basically anything. You can click on each one and you can see what it does, and you can click on these different ones. Here I can go to my modulation source and I drag all these knobs in and stuff. You can do some really neat stuff, and you got these LFOs here, you got envelopes here, all these things. Close on this, and there's a lot you can do with it. I haven't really taken a deep dive. Actually, I should probably do that. I should take a deep dive into this and see. What I've been just doing with Pigments really is just loading up presets. So let me show you how I would use presets, and this is kind of getting into how I would expect you to utilize this information I've given you today. It is important to learn how to do stuff from scratch to a point, but it's mostly that's to get you to the point of understanding what's going on with stuff. So let's take a look at Pigments here, and we're going to go over here. We're going to go to Template, and we're going to go to Analog Triple VCO, which is actually, let's go to, there's a bunch of different ones. Let's use a triple VCO. So VCO stands for voltage controlled oscillator. So here we go. Here's a triple VCO in here, and it's analog stuff. And basically, if I hit play on this, wait, let's make sure we're listening to. Yeah, we are. Okay, cool. Whoa. So here's this, and we've got our 3 oscillators playing here, and you can see each one has its volume knob here, and we can go between our 2 different filters. So this is basically a super basic analog type of setup, and you got different things going on here. So if I wanted to change the sound, I'm like, I like the sound, but I want to change it a little bit. First of all, I'd kind of look at what's going on over here. You've got analog, you've got 2 engines here. We're only using 1 engine right now, which is 3 oscillators in it. So I can go in here and I can say, all right, cool. And I've never actually looked at this one before. I can just glance at it and see what's happening. So I can pull up the volume here. There's this. Let's pull this one up, and this one's acting as a sub oscillator. Cool. So what we've got going on here is this is my filter over here, and I can change my filter cutoff. Now, one of the things that I love about pigments so much, and the reason why I actually got it, is because Arturia is very famous for recreating analog synths. They're very famous for making analog emulations. And so you can hear the sound just sounds so much better than Massive, just straight out of the box. Just sounds amazing. Just a great, big, fat, nice sound. Because it's an analog emulation, and they put all their knowledge of analog emulations into this. But then what happens is it's got all these different types of routing and capabilities and stuff like that. So I got my envelope over here, and you can see when I hit my key, I've got my 3 envelopes that happen right here. And you can see what's going on over here. My amplifier, my envelope 2, is messing with this one here, I guess. And let's see here. This is the part that I don't know as much about. Let's see, how does this work? Okay, so this is our routing matrix here. So I click on it, I click on the little arrow up here, and it says, okay, envelope 2 is affecting that. So now it's not affecting it at all. And if I want envelope number 2 to affect it more, yeah, so you can see how that works. Right, and that's how all that stuff sets up. I feel like they changed it at some point, because it used to. Yeah, I haven't opened it up as much since they changed it, because I remember they did like a big update on this thing. So I feel like this stuff in the middle is different. It used to be like you dragged it up to something. All right, so we've got all these different things that we can work with, all these keyboard modifiers and all this stuff. So you can really do a lot with it, and it's not that hard once you take a glance at it. But my point is that I want you to get to the point where you can open up a synth and you can look at it and say, okay, here's what's happening, here's what I need to change. So if I go look at a more complicated sound in here, let's go look at some string sounds or whatever. Let's listen to Nebula. So this one, big beautiful sound. You can see it's like so heavy with all my computer doing all this stuff, recording and sending and all this stuff. It's like actually overtaxing my computer a little bit. But I can look at this and I can say, all right, I want my filter to do some different stuff. And here's my filter. I want the sound to get brighter. So that's how I can make that happen. And just without even knowing the sound, I can just look at it and say, okay, that's what it is, because I can see my oscillators are over here, my filter's over here, and my amplifier, here's my amp mod is over here, and some stuff like that. So I could go and say, okay, well, I wonder what's doing with the amplifier. I click on envelopes. Okay, envelope number 1 is, it's so smooth. I totally agree with you, X-Paul. So smooth. Envelope VCA is over here. VCA stands for amplifier. And I can change this. So if I want to change the sound, so it's a hard on and a hard off. Let's take the effects off here. So here's my effects. Take off the, I don't want the reverb and stuff here. Let's chorus. Let's turn the, okay, yeah, there we go, cool. Okay, so now it's a little bit loud. Master out. So here now we just turn that pad sound into kind of a lead sound. You know, you can bring it down. And you can change that sound completely with just a few buttons that I've clicked on here. But because I know how to program synthesizers even a little bit, and I understand how things work, then I can say, like, I love that sound as a starting point, but I want to make it into a different type of sound. And here we are. I made it into a different type of sound. So I hope that kind of helps you to wrap your head around how these synthesizers work. And you just see a few variety of things. During this week, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording there.